Okay, whose idea was it to put the Hallmark card aisle right at the front door of our local Walmart? There's not a guy within 50 feet. Welcome to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates, coming to you live from the Northeast Georgia mountains right here in the tiny town of Tiger. It's a sunny day. Let's get started. Seriously, whose idea was it to put the greeting card aisle right by the front door where everyone's going to walk by? I never see a guy camped out there. It's always 4 or 5 women that are standing and reading card after card, sometimes with tears in their eyes. And if the card that they're reading really strikes their heart, they'll lean over to the lady next to them and say, have you seen this one? And they'll get in a discussion about these cards. And before you know it, 2 or 3 ladies will be in a discussion about these greeting cards, and they'll be in tears. No guy is going to walk up and get involved in that. No, he would rather watch a chick flick, probably, most likely, which is not going to be his thing. No. He'll sit down and watch something where someone's arm is getting blown off, for sure. But he's not going to watch a chick flick, much less read a romance novel. You're not going to see him do that either. And probably a close third in the middle of this is he will not be standing in the card aisle, picking up card after card, reading through. No, the average guy is probably going to be standing about 15 feet away, walking back and forth, having the eagle eye view, looking out for whatever artwork appeals in the moment. Which is why I believe they made those great big cards that look like posters, so that guys can see those from a good distance and go, that's good right there. It's big. It says whatever I need it to say. I can grab it quick and go. Now he'll look for that perfect card at a distance. And he'll walk up and he'll snatch it out of the rack real quick and he'll read it. And if it says pretty close to what he wants, that's good enough. We'll put it in the cart and go. If not, he'll stick it back in to draw again. And he'll draw the second card out. And he'll read it and hope that it says exactly what he wants it to say. But if it doesn't, the chances are he may not pull a third. It's going to be the first one or the second one, usually. Which brings me to the point of why is he actually there in the first place? Well, you can rest assured that if a man is standing there reading the greeting cards in the aisle and looking for that perfect card, especially this month of February, it's because he's in love. Or it's because he loves the one that he's choosing the card for. And that's something we need to talk about. The one thing that is the life-altering, captivating view to the heart of a man and to the heart of a woman. Love. A perspective that we don't really understand. It's also a perspective that is quickly moving past and by us, a thing of the past. I was reading a book a while back that was talking about the fact that college professors they've been interviewing these college professors across the nation. And they asked the question, of all the things that you've taught, what was the most difficult for your students to grasp? Hands down, the answer was Shakespeare. And then they were asked, why is that? The answer was that students today could not grasp the concept of love or anything that had to do with it. Things like desiring to be with or serving someone else, or the concept of longing to see someone, or the emotion and the anticipation to get to someone. All of that had been long since gone. With the introduction of social networking and the ability to contact each other 24/7, with the busyness of today's life, with all of the things that are available at your fingertips, the one-to-one social reaction or one-on-one social interaction, and the love that goes with it is quickly falling by the wayside. And since stepping out on a first date, actually, today, to step out on a first date actually means stepping away from the dinner table at that date and straight to the bedroom today. Romance and everything that goes with it has become something that is long lost in the past, which is a shame. We turn on old movies. We see old movies where the man falls in love with the girl. There's nothing that he wouldn't do. Or if he's kind of been a jerk, he'll come to his senses, and then there's nothing that he wouldn't do. But in all of these films, you'll see something take place. All of these films of romance way back. I'll tell you, one of the most romantic films of all time, The Sound of Music, an incredible, incredible film. There's a look. There's a look that happens between the two that is incredible. And you know that they're in love. Does that actually take place? Does it take place today? Can you find it today? It's rare. Most of the time, if I begin to talk about love, I begin to sing songs about love, I get the answer back from men often. Do you honestly think that these things really do happen to people? Let me just say to you, yes, they do. What does it look like when a man falls in love? Well, I was in a large retail bookstore recently, and I picked up a book of poetry written by men over 100 years ago. And in those pages, I found a reality of what it looked like. As a man loved a girl, and he penned his heart out in this book. And there were different poems by different men over 100 years old. And one spoke of everything around her as being more beautiful whenever she was near. One spoke of the deep anguish that he felt when she was far away from him. One spoke of the joy that was brought to his heart when she stood beside him. And on, and on, and on. You see, gentlemen, when a man falls in love, it's transformational to his entire being. And something happens within him. I remember watching an interview on Johnny Carson when I was around a freshman in high school. And one night, Johnny interviewed a farmer. He was roughly around 100 years old. And he said, what was love like in those days? And the farmer began to describe. He said, you actually talked to one another. He said, you loved being with one another. You were the best of friends. He began to talk about that friendship, and then Johnny sort of interrupted him at some point, and he said, well, I understand that the girls were covered head to toe in those days. And the farmer said, well, why, sure. And he said, so you never actually got a glimpse of any part of a woman? And the farmer said, well, you might have gotten a glimpse of her ankle. And Johnny began to laugh, and he said, well, what happened to you when you saw the ankle? And I will never forget, the face of that farmer turned bright red, and a smile came to his face, and he looked down at the floor with such innocence. And that man, reaching 100 years old, had the boy inside of that man come to life in the moment, and a smile and an innocence of a child came to his face. Love brought that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are missing that today. It's something that's long since passed. If you find it, it's very rare. What happens when a man really does fall in love with a woman? Well, when he looks at her in his heart, he's never seen anything or anyone more beautiful. To him, she's the perfect piece of artwork. He memorizes every single line that God has placed upon her. To him, he'll look into her eyes, and they'll be his very favorite color. And he won't understand why. He'll just look and think to himself, wow, how amazing she looks. He'll love looking into her eyes. And the deeper that he looks into them, the more and more his heart begins to skip a beat. He'll find himself in a place where he cannot And he will not take his eyes off of her because he's captivated by her beauty. When she enters a room, she is instantly the scenery. Make no mistake, she brings with her a view that captivates his soul. And when he reaches for her hand, the moment that they touch, he feels it to the core of his being. And as he holds her hand, sometime between 3 and 10 minutes roughly, their hearts will begin to beat in sync. And by the way, this really does happen. Their hearts will begin to beat in sync, and he can feel the heartbeat in the palm of his hand as their hearts beat together as one. When a man falls in love, when he is with her, it's like being at home. She is home to him. No one ever has felt like home quite like she has, and she does. Nor will they ever. So he will always run back to her. He will always seek to get closer back to her because there'll be no one like home that feels like home like her. To him, the sound of her voice is perfection. And when she speaks, he hangs on to every single word she says because she alone can speak directly to the boy that's inside of the man. And that boy runs to her every single time because he loves what she sounds like, even if it's just listening to her breathe. And when a man loves a woman, you know this song, he can't keep his mind on nothing else. Oh, she's precious to him. And even when the hard moments come, even when those difficult moments come, he loves even those because she's in them. And he's just glad to be wherever she is. And what other people may look up and see might be faults, they are precious to him because of the love in his heart for her. She will always be his destination. He always runs to her to be wherever she is. She becomes the destination. If she's 15 hours away, he'll run to where she is, no matter what's around her, no matter what happens. She may be at Niagara Falls. He'll run to Niagara Falls, but he won't be looking at Niagara Falls when he's there. She'll be the scenery that he runs to. She'll be the view. She'll be what captivates his heart. If he loves her deeply, he'll actually know when she's around. He'll be able to feel her presence when she's within 50 feet of him. And then when she's apart from him, it will be like his soul is torn apart. And he will long for her and suffer greatly for her until she returns to his presence. And when he sits her down in the sunlight, she is a sight to behold. Everything around her becomes more vivid. Everything becomes more alive because she brings the beauty to the scenery. The sunsets are more glorious. The sunrises are more beautiful. The leaves in the trees are more vivid. The sky is more blue. Everything comes to life because of the beauty that she adds to the view. And then when the sun goes down at night, the stars of the heavens become more majestic than ever when she's there. And the glow of the moonlight off of her face never ceases to take his breath away. When a man loves a woman, he will protect and defend her at all cost. No one would dare say anything about her in his presence, or they will experience his wrath. And with his love, there is nothing that he would not do for her. He lives every day to see her smile. And when he cares for her and that smile comes, his heart beams with joy because he can't wait to do for her again. She will be his inspiration. And thoughts from his heart will rush to his mind, and with his pen he'll write sentiments that he would have never known had it not been for her presence. And those sentiments he'll never write to another human being. And they will strike her heart in such a way that his cards and his letters will be cherished by her. And the ones that she has written to him, he will cherish and treasure deep within his heart always. When a man loves a woman, you'll find the fervent desire of his heart will be to spend every day for the rest of his life with her. And they'll be in conversations. Things like, sweetheart, when I leave this world, I may not have a mansion in heaven, but maybe I'll just be able to pull up a chunk of curb. And maybe you can just sit beside me and we can continue our conversations into eternity. Yeah, his heart will be to spend every day with her from now on. And he loves her. And he'll find within himself that with every blink of his eyes, he'll pray that she's in view for the rest of his life. And finally, one day, with his very last breath, as she leans down to listen to him whisper, he'll breathe out, and with the last beat of his heart, he will say, "Baby, I love you." If you've never experienced it, then you just don't know. If you're a man who doesn't understand what I'm saying right now, then you may not know or have never known true love. I'm not saying that you haven't. Oftentimes we get busy serving and we get busy at our lives. We get busy at our work and we say, well, I do this because I love. And there are tons and tons and tons of people that tell me all the things that they do because they love. But there's something that takes place that captivates your soul for her that's unlike anything else that has ever happened in your life. Have you ever looked up and said to her, if I lost everything, I mean all of it. I mean, and by the way, with all of your heart said these things. If just looked her in the eye and said, sweetheart, if I lost everything, I mean everything, all of it, everything we had, all that I had was gone. And all I ended up with were the clothes on my back. But I had you. It would all be worth it. It's powerful. That kind of love, it's transformational. It's missing in the relationships of today so often. I believe it's one of the reasons that we have the issues that we have between couples today. I also believe it's one of the reasons why we have the issues that we have in our churches today. What happens in our life when that kind of love all of a sudden develops between us and Jesus Christ? What happens when the bride of Christ actually becomes captivated for Christ, just like I'm talking to you about how a man loves a woman? Is that actually possible? Is it truly possible to have that kind of love for Jesus? What does that kind of love actually even look like? Can you find that in the pages of Scripture? Sure you can. In Matthew 13:44, I'll read it to you. It says this, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid, and for joy over it he goes and sells all that he has and he buys that field." 45 says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold it, all that he had, and he bought that pearl." I've known many times where the love between a man and a woman, where a man loves a woman and she is the treasure of his heart. He cherishes her more than anything. And I've known many times when she has done the same in reverse. That's powerful. But what about the bride to Christ? Today with men, oftentimes we see that kind of love has not translated as much, which is why in the church, oftentimes you see that really the female population inside the doors of the church oftentimes is greater than men, and it actually was at times in Paul's day. If you look in the book of 1 Corinthians as well, you'll see that taking place as well, because they begin to understand that relationship being relational. It's not about what you do for God. It's about who you are with him and the fact that he's captivated your heart. It makes all the difference in the world. And when this kind of love begins to seize a hold of a man and he loves Jesus in the same way that I'm telling you about, that he would love his bride, or a woman loves Jesus in the way that she would love her groom, the same, because it actually is the bride of Christ who is loving the groom that transforms everything. What does that love look like? Well, we find that in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Paul begins to talk about what love is. So many times people quote the scriptures on, if you love Jesus, here's what you'll be doing. But if you love Jesus, let's talk about what love is. Verse 4 in 1 Corinthians 13 says, love is patient, or it's long-suffering. That means, long-suffering means this, that a person you've been apart from, it's what happens when you take her home or you leave her presence and you walk away from her door one night and you cannot wait the hours to get back to her the next morning to see her, gentlemen. That's what it feels like for long-suffering. You long to get back together. You cannot wait for that to get back together. That's the very first thing. Love is long-suffering. Cannot wait to get back to that person. And it's kind. It does not envy. It doesn't envy who they are. It does not parade itself. It's not boastful. It's not puffed up. It's not all about. It's not self-seeking. It does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own. It's not easily provoked. I'm telling you, when you get in some human relationships, sometimes it may take a lot to provoke, but it's not easily provoked. It thinks no evil. Basically, it keeps no record of wrongs. Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. What does the truth look like? Well, the truth that we're talking about here, it rejoices in all truth, yes, but it rejoices in the truth that there is genuine love. Rejoices in the fact that there is. It bears all things. No matter how difficult things become, it bears all things. Believes all things. Hopes all things. Endures all things. Boy, if that love reflected back to God was that way. The church oftentimes today looks up in the direction of God, and when they don't get what they want, with the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel that's so prevalent in church, what we're worshiping is ourselves so often that when we don't get what we want, fine, I won't talk to you, and we give God the silent treatment, oftentimes more often than we do anyone else. We're patient with everyone else but God when we don't get what we want. And that ought to tell you a little bit about who you're worshiping. If you really want to discover what it is that you love, it's been said that the first thing that you get up to and you run to, and the last thing that you put down at night, that is where you'll find the desire of your heart. And you let some difficulty come, and it doesn't work out to be in your favor. And when it comes to the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel, if the cash ain't flowing, or you've lost a job, or you've taken a hit physically in some way or another, we're quick to cast God to the side. Sometimes we cry out for help. But it's amazing how distant we can become. Now we deal with each other with this same kind of love out of 1 Corinthians 13, but oftentimes we're more patient with others than we are with God himself. So to reflect this kind of love back to God means everything. After all, the greatest commandment according to Jesus in the Gospels is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all of your strength. That's the first commandment. We're not even barely getting off the line, really, on this. We should love the Lord our God with all of our heart, but yet we love everything else that we can reach for around us. We love that thing we hold in our hand and we scroll all day long. We run to in the morning and we put it down last at night before we'll ever run to God. There are so many things that are in our view that we squirrel to left and right. What would happen if we stopped and said, God, captivate my heart? And we got in the Word every single day and we began to really search for the heart of God. Lord, I want to love you with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my mind, and with all my strength. Can it happen? Yes. Is it rare? Yes. Ladies, are there men that exist like this? Yes. Are they rare? Yes. They are rare. Most do not know this kind of love. Again, by the way, let me say this. I'm not downing on guys today. I'm not doing that. But then there are in reverse as well, people who've never known this kind of love, and it comes in both directions. What I'm saying to you today is this. In order to find it, it begins with Jesus and loving God. You cannot love someone else with the heart that you need to without first loving God, not in the fullest potential. What would it take for the bride of Christ to become captivated by him, by the very scenery of him? And what does that look like when they are? When this kind of love is applied back toward God, it is incredible. Everything else is placed in its right place. What would it look like? It would change everything. He would then become our destination. He'd be the one that we would run to. In Ecclesiastes, it says we ought to seek him in the morning and noon and night. We ought to seek him because sometimes in the morning, things might not hit us right. Sometimes noonday, it might not hit us right, but it might be the fact that the evening is the time. Then the next day, it might be the fact that the morning is the time. But he becomes our destination that we run to. He becomes the one that we can't wait to get back to. What would that look like? Not the fact that, oh my goodness, we have to go to church today. Oh my goodness, I have to get up and do my quiet time. No, he's the one we can't wait to get back to. What happens when he becomes the one that we just can't take our eyes off of? We can't take our eyes off of him because he is that captivating to our heart. What happens when he becomes the one that we can't stop thinking about or talking about or defending at all costs because he's captivated our heart? What happens when he becomes the one that we can't wait to talk to? Or better yet, when he becomes the one that we can't wait to hear from or hear his letters, read his letters by getting in the Word. When a man loves a woman, he'll sit hours by her and listen to her breathe. When's the last time we sat just with Jesus, just to be there and bask in his presence? And finally, he becomes the one that we can't wait to be with and experience forever. The one we can't wait to get home to. And that is where the church should be. But she has her hands in so many other things that captivate her heart that she's missed the one that would transform and revolutionize her life. When he becomes the most beautiful scenery that you've ever seen, the past is put in the past where it belongs. Our life becomes a place of order, which is amazing. And when he becomes that sight that is captivating, nothing, and I mean the troubles of today, don't look near like what they do right now. And all of this stuff that's coming at us 90 to nothing all the time gets put in its rightful place. And those things become a lot less loud in our mind and in our hearts because of the fact that our sights are set on God. And if you want proof, I can go to Acts and take a look at Stephen, who was standing there on the day of his stoning. He had loved Jesus. he was going to defend him at all costs, and they grabbed a hold of him and they put him to the side and they said, we're going to stone him here in this moment. And about the time they were about to cast that first stone, he looked up and he said, I can see Jesus. And he was captivated by the heart of Jesus. And I am convinced he never felt the first stone hit him because of the captivation of the scenery of Christ, because of the love that he had for him in his heart. That's who we need to be. They would revolutionize the church. You wouldn't be able to fit the people in the church houses in this nation. If that was the case, it would change our life. It's who we need to be. We're the bride of Christ. When men were burned at the stake in the day, they weren't screaming out because of the heat of the flames. They were preaching about Jesus and a message of forgiveness from those flames because of the love they had for Christ. Ladies and gentlemen, we need Jesus to captivate our hearts. In all of this talk of love right now, during this month that is happening right this second, our hearts need to be set on the one that love came from. And we need to reflect that kind of love back to him. It's transformational when he becomes the love of your life. And when he becomes the view and he is the scenery, there is nothing you wouldn't do for him. You can't wait to get to him. You've been listening to Grounded. I'm Scott Cates. So that brings me to this question. Do you know Jesus as Savior? Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Today, will you reach out and speak to Jesus if you do not know him as Savior? If you've not asked Christ to come into your life and forgive you of your sins, which stand in the way of the relationship between you and him, would you step out now and just talk to Jesus and say, the desire of my heart, Lord, is to know you and to love you. I want you more than anything else. Just talk to God and say this. So I give you my life now. Forgive me of my sins and help me to walk in you. And if you're a believer in Jesus Christ and you don't have this kind of love and you've never experienced this kind of love, what's in the way? What are you reaching for? What are you running for the first thing in the morning and the last thing you put down at night? Would you put those things down to run, to fall in love with Jesus? Would you put those things down to set him first and the scenery of your life so that those things could take their place in the order of your life of importance as he becomes first? Because I can tell you what will happen when he does. The things that you should love and the things that you should desire and the things that will bring the greatest joy to your life will then come to life. And it'll be amazing. The old hymn says, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. You've been listening to Grounded. I'm Scott Cates, and I'm so glad you joined me for this podcast today. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. See you next Monday.